This question is actually directed to Mr. Moss. Mr. Moss, are you familiar with and proud of the speech zone limit that CU Boulder imposes on the campus? Should colleges and universities limit speech often in very small areas?
I believe there was just a law that amended the speech zone area. I've always thought that the idea of a free speech zone is a bit of an oxymoron. Because if you have the right to free speech, it isn't the right to speech that, rather than being free, is deeply restricted to one area. And I'm about to litigate a free speech case about students on a college campus. So I've never liked the idea of free speech zones. What I'll say is this: there are zones in which you get to say what you want. Those are public fora. That's the plaza in the middle of campus, where you have all sorts of wacky signs and chalk markings and things like that. Then you have your math class, where you're defying the purpose of the math class. If you say, you know what, I, as a teacher or a student in math class, would like to talk about my religion instead. And then there's the middle ground. So I think there is, in First Amendment law, the concept of the full public fora, in which one cannot exclude any political or religious content or viewpoint. Then there's the limited purpose public fora, where perhaps there's a setting in which it's an event that's designated for speech about the election and it's an open forum. Or for example, this: if you wanted to ask me math questions, well, no, it's not a free speech zone, even if this is a public school, because this is a forum that was designated for discussing issues of religion in American society. So I think a lot of it depends on the setting, but no, I'm not a fan of the idea that you have to restrict your speech. Now, if you don't have free speech zones, then you need a little bit more ad hoc determination of when your speech is starting to obstruct walkways or damage property or interfere with others' rights. But I tend to take the view that the First Amendment requires a great deal of tolerance and patience on the part of all of us. So if you don't have free speech zones, then there may have to be determinations. Well, this walkway is being congested by handing out leaflets, move over to the other side. And I'll add, though, again, it overlaps with the previous question about the 10 Commandments. I'll say this too on that. Let's say a college wanted to have the 10 Commandments. When you argue, as Alex did, that the 10 Commandments, he mentioned it's a non-religious code of morality because some just say murder. Well, he somehow omitted the commandment, thou shalt have no other gods. When you argue the 10 Commandments, which have very early on, thou shalt have no other gods before me, when you argue that's a non-religious code, I don't even know how we're debating because that's not reality.
And Mr. Moss, thank you so much. You have 34 seconds left. Would you like to add to that, Mr. Weinstein?
I'll try to say this real fast because Alex mentioned about maybe we just ran across some Christians that were unkind. What do you do in a military context when they quote John 3:36? Those who accept Christ get everlasting life, and those who don't have the wrath of God on them forever. Or they quote the parable of the pounds in their perspective, Luke 19:27. Jesus says, go out among the crowd and bring back before me all those who will not accept me as king over them and slaughter them in front of me. Check, pull your Bibles out and look at it. This happens all the time. Is that free speech?
And that's
How is that within the military context?
And would you like the question repeated?
Sure.
Are you familiar with and proud of the free speech zone limit on CU Boulder that CU Boulder imposes on campus? Should colleges and universities limit speech often in very small areas?
Well, Mr. Moss and I are not doing a really great job debating each other because so far we're really agreeing on a lot of these constitutional principles. I would like to add to what he said by commenting that student free speech is a fairly serious problem across the country. A lot of public universities have either clamped down on particular viewpoints, which is unconstitutional, or they've had really narrow free speech zones. There's a free speech organization called FIRE, which is bipartisan, which goes around the country defending student free speech. Wonderful people. Colorado's to be commended because our legislature just passed a student free speech law that embraces broad free speech for students on public university campuses. The bill was sponsored by a Democrat, you all need to know that. It was voted bipartisan, and so I commend our legislature for addressing that problem. I will say that evangelicals probably feel that problem pretty deeply. there are contexts, as we've discussed, where evangelicals may be in a majority and they may at times make other people feel uncomfortable. That's not so much the case on the public college campuses. A recent study was done, an actual study was trying to get at how much anti-Semitism there was on college campuses. And what the researchers found to their surprise was, from the perspective of college professors, there really wasn't anti-Semitism. What there was a fair amount of anti-Catholicism and a significant amount of anti-evangelicalism. I think it was 53% of the professors felt either coolly or negatively towards evangelical students. And it may have just been that they thought they were kind of stupid, but that's still a negative bias, right? And so for evangelicals, there's been some concern about the issues of free speech on campus. I don't know that we've totally solved the problem for everybody in Colorado, but this new bill's a great step in that direction.
Let me respond to the question, is the Ten Commandments an expression of religion or morality? It's long been recognized that there's an ethical code that has been known the world over. Societies, pre-Christian up through the Christian era, have recognized, you don't steal, you don't lie, you don't murder, you don't bear false witness. Jay Budziszewski, a UT Austin political science, wrote a book called What You Can't Not Know, where he documents all of the different cultures that have this moral awareness that is very reminiscent of, pictorial of the Ten Commandments. So we lose that at our own peril.
We'll call time.